All right, here we go. We got a podcast, AI with Alec. We got Josh Walker here, who is the co-founder, and CEO of Sports Innovation Lab, which is at the intersection of ontology, knowledge graph, sports, data, infrastructure, all the geeky stuff I love, and I know lots of you folks love too. And big shout out to Igor. We were just talking about you and saying all the nice things about you and your incredible way with words and your genius. So speaking of geniuses, Josh, tell us a little bit about that awesome quote that I saw inside of, I think it was on your website, or maybe it was that killer LinkedIn post about a week ago where we connected, where you said something along the lines of, you've had a lot of people in the past say to you, I really love what you guys do, but I need to better understand how to work with you. And I think that informs some of your thinking around where the company is and where you're headed. And I'd love for you to kind of speak that a bit, and feel free to take it anywhere you want to go.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. I did listen to a number of your shows before, so it's really impressive how you're covering the space, and really honored to sort of be here and be talking to your audience. The nature of that statement, I think, is a little bit like we were a victim of our own success. We were doing a really good job with thought leadership, so a lot of people sort of thought we were a research company. We ran really good events, and that's a tribute to my CMO. And so people were like, oh, you must be an events company. And then we were also just pretty much on top of a lot of the trends that were happening in the industry. So we looked almost like a media company, and we got conflated with some of the industry trade publications like Sports Pro and Sportico and Front Office Sports that were covering our industry. So it took us a little bit of time to just create some distance. And what I wanted to do as a founder, what we wanted to do as a founding team, was bring serious technology to this industry, because it's been a little bit of a laggard when it comes to using enterprise technology. So we wanted to try to create at least a narrative that was, dispelling some of that, previous assumption about what we were doing, and really, plant a flag firmly in the technology space, in the data space.
I love that. I'm going to double click because I'm a total nerd in this space. Let's get into the infrastructure and the data, stack a bit. I know, and I saw on your website that, you all are big fans of Snowflake, as am I. And I know a lot of folks that, listen and watch and consume the content I put out there. They think very highly of Sridhar Ramaswamy, the CEO who's crushing it. Would love to hear a bit more about the data infrastructure that you all are bringing to the table, and how that's helping the industry connect some dots in ways that perhaps before you guys were on the scene, they weren't necessarily able to, because it's extremely impressive, the amount of data that you all have available across so many different key stakeholders.
Yeah, well, I think when we started the company, what we found out very quickly, because we had C-level access, and we were working with the largest brands and the largest leagues in the world, and that was a privilege to kind of be able to talk to those folks one-to-one, understand what their challenges were. And what you found out very quickly is this industry's data poor. And the example I give for people who don't know the sports industry really well is that a sports team or a league will give their concession data or business to somebody. They'll give their merchandise business to somebody like a Fanatics or a New Era. They'll give their media business to anybody who pays them for the rights to their content. And, the ticketing business, StubHub, SeatGeek, Ticketmaster. So they're sort of disintermediated from that connection with that fan. And so when you think about like what kind of fan intelligence are they working with, it's very, very sparse. So I want to build a technology stack that was built on data that would allow us to go in and say, we don't need to touch your data. And that just blows people's mind. Well, how would you tell me anything about my fans if you don't touch our data? My background in sort of building data companies is to look for sources of data that other people don't have, or that they're not using in the way that I would use them, or that the company should use them. And then we create what's called derivative value, right? If you can get access to data sets that people don't really normally think of as having certain value or purpose, and you can derive that value or purpose from it, right? And you can do it at scale, then you have a really interesting product and service in the industry. And that's what we're really trying to do. And you mentioned Snowflake. Look, Snowflake, Databricks, you can pick your platform. They're all designed for data collaboration. And at the core of what we're doing is we're assembling data sets that are very unique to sports, media, and entertainment. And we want our partners to be able to, participate in that conversation, share their data sets, and do it in a secure way. All those platforms enable that to happen. And that gives us a tremendous amount of credibility when you go into the NFL and you say, look, we're SOC 2 1 Trust compliant, we're built on Snowflake, we can use a clean room. Those kinds of things give you a different level of understanding than if you're like in there saying, hey, we got some bodies that can work on your CRM data. You sound like a consultant, you sound like you're going to take months and months and months to deliver any value. We can come in and say, we know things about your fans. If you share your data with us in the clean room or we match it, we can give you more information about them.
That's fantastic. And it's so, I think what you said about the industry as a whole and maybe not the most tech and data centric and lean in and forward, thinking in some respects. I can say that out loud.
Which is surprising to a lot of people, right? Like, I mean, it's surprising in the sense that this is a big, shiny, sexy sports, industry, and they're not leading in that way.
Yes. And, superstition is real, right? Moneyball is real. You can read the book, you can watch the movie. There's a lot of things that we could talk about there, both on and off camera. That being said, I would love, just because I bet you the audience is thinking it right now and going, hey, could you ask Josh to maybe walk us through a use case? You could even go to a case study if you're able and comfortable doing that, but would love for you to like make it real. So take as much time as you'd like, but would love to hear you unpack. Here's a problem statement, and here's how we helped solve for that problem statement, and frame it a bit for folks. 'Cause I'm sure folks are excited to hear that.
Yeah, I wish I had like those bleeding edge examples that would get everybody sitting on the edge of their seat. But if you take where we're starting from in this industry, we're really still in the mode of data wrangling and organizing information for these guys. So I'll use NASCAR, I'll use the NFL. Those are two really good examples where we had to actually go out and grab data that they didn't have access to. And we did this purposely to position ourselves as strategic to both of those organizations. One, let's take NASCAR. They know anybody who comes to NASCAR.com or goes to an event that they're running and they're managing those back-end systems. They have multiple events across this country where they do not have a relationship with that racetrack, or they do not know what's going on in terms of commerce or retail that's happening there. So we went out and we found 30 plus racetracks where that was actually the case. And we could start seeing how fans were behaving there because we were seeing the credit card, debit card transactions. We were seeing other media signals around those events. So we were able to start building a profile that expanded the racing community beyond what NASCAR could see. Okay, very valuable to walk in the door and say, we know something you don't know. The same was true with the NFL. Angela Ruggiero is my co-founder. She's on the IOC. She's been on the IOC for a number of years. She said, look, the Olympics is going to start to have NFL flag as an Olympic sport. We should be ahead of the game here and really be thinking about this. So we went out and we looked at all the different local communities that have flag football. And the NFL knows everybody that's on NFL.com, anybody that gets the streaming product from them, NFL Plus, but they're missing like this view of like hundreds, sometimes thousands of these local organizations where a kid comes, registers for flag football, and that information could be gleaned and understood, and you can know what that family does. So we went out and we mapped all of that so that we would have a broader view of the NFL fan than the NFL did themselves.
So let's dig in further, right? And I see how I can imagine how I should say, as somebody who feels like a million years ago I was in the NFL, on the sales and marketing side of things, but I can see how that could benefit the league office, how it could benefit teams, and so on and so forth. Is it safe to say your client in that instance and your customer is the league and the teams? And or does it also stretch over to the sponsors and prospective sponsors who now can benefit from the data that you're now enabling the league to see that they hadn't necessarily seen before, so they can now perhaps monetize it and create fan experiences, to the next level, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, like if all my business was selling to teams and leagues, there's only 150 of them in the US. There's more now because of some of these new emerging leagues, but like that's a very small TAM. So you have to think of us as sitting in the center of the ecosystem where you have agencies, marketing agencies, sports specific agencies like Octagon and Wasserman and GMR and all the others. You have the brands themselves, State Farm, Nike, New Balance, Bauer. They all want to reach those consumers. Dick's Sporting Goods. Then you have all the technology companies that use sports to tell a story. You have Amazon and Intel and all those guys. So we sit in the middle of all of that. And what we're really trying to do is help really ready the entire industry for what we think is absolutely going to happen with AI, which is more of this one-to-one content delivery, one-to-one content marketing. It's not just about programmatic advertising where you want to make sure your ads are getting clicked on in the right place. This is literally about like you having a different sports center than I have, right? Because you're heavy into sports betting. I'm heavy into women's sports. You're heavy into the men talk shows where they're screaming at each other. I want maybe documentary style or longer form content. So we can have different content being viewed at the very same time on connected television because we understand the preferences of the consumer. That's what AI is going to do at scale, and you need to have the data on the consumer to have the right conversation and deliver that right content at the right time.
Absolutely fascinating. And I'll use an example. There's only one hockey team in my world, and you can guess it. It's the New York Rangers. There's infinite demand for me for the New York Rangers, especially in this horrible offseason that we're about to have. And so I'm going to play it back, for those that are, that are listening. So what you're essentially suggesting and saying, and I 100% believe you and agree with you, by the way, is that we're going to step into a hyper-personalization arena that's going to be enabled by these gnarly data sets that are going to continue to grow. And the ability to take those data sets and create hyper-personalized content experiences so that Alec Coughlin never, under any circumstances, receives any Philadelphia Flyers or any of those terrible hockey team-related content pieces. Like, all I'm getting is Mika staying? Is he going? Is Kreider going to be around? What does the future look like for us? How can we get our what together? Like that's where it's going. And if so, take it to the, what is it? The art of the possible. Like, what's it going to look like? And how much money can I give the Rangers to have a better experience, by the way? Because I'm in.
I think the Rangers are going to pay you.
Let's hope so,
I'm not even being facetious. I think you are going to, especially because of the platform you've already created, like you're going to be a super creator. Like these AI tools, if the sports properties are smart enough to loosen their rights, to give the fans the ability to play with rights protected content, you are going to be a super spreader, right? And you're going to have branded content out there, and there's going to be thousands, if not millions of you building the Rangers brand, giving greater exposure to their, sponsors and helping them sell merch and drive OTT subscriptions and all the things they want to do, because I truly believe that in the future where AI makes it so easy for us to all create professional looking content, professional websites and agents and all the things that we're going to be able to do, they'd be fools to try to do that all in house, and they'd be really silly to try to protect it all, right? I think it's going to be in their best interest, and they're going to have tremendous incentive to let Alec be the voice of the Rangers.
So I converted my wife to a Ranger fan, which was not the easiest thing to do for somebody who, frankly, didn't really care too much for hockey before we met. That being said, I'm going to take it one step further. Ready? So I love to use emojis and GIFs. Anybody that knows me knows, like, anytime I can communicate that way versus sending a text message, et cetera. And I've said this so many times, and I hope the NHL hears this, is I don't know why they don't enable people like me who are ridiculous and ridiculous Ranger fans, but I think what I'm hearing is they might, where I could pay to create my own unique emojis and GIFs and so on and so forth, so that I could fire off, the right emoji at the right time, always with, New York Ranger creative, versus every once in a while I got to use a Tom Brady thing, because I love Tom Brady, but you can imagine, how well that goes over with New York sports fans. But, I'd much rather be using Ranger creative. So what you're saying is that I know technically it's possible, but you think it's feasible that I could become a super spreader of the New York Rangers love, which could contribute to more love and winning for the New York Rangers? Is that where we're going?
I actually think if you understand the sports industry even just a little bit, the collective bargaining agreements, those negotiations that happen between the players and the leagues every few years, is really where the NFLPA, the NHLPA, a lot of the players associations are going to really try to carve out some of those rights as well, like because the players should be the super spreaders. They should be monetizing their own brands. They should be benefiting economically from this. And unless there's some sort of synergy between the league agreements and the media rights and all those things that really get complicated, there's going to be a battleground on this, because I think you're seeing this in the NFL. You're definitely seeing it in the WNBA. When these kids are incentivized at the amateur level with the NIL deals to move into college and then move into the pros, they've already got their brand set up now. And they don't want to give that away. They've built tremendous equity in that. So they want to actually have you being a super spreader of your favorite player, of your, of the highlights, of all those things. I really think that's the next frontier of this battleground.
It's fascinating. And tell me a little bit more, and you can get as geeky as you'd like, and I would love it. I know, 60, 70% of my audience would too, because deeply technical, but tell us a little bit about the role that the data sets can play in maybe de-risking those types of new business model innovation conversations, because I feel like where you're going potentially is that you're going to make it a lot easier for a lot of different stakeholders to come together and start expanding the pie. But the data underneath it is what's really making it a lot easier versus like all the hypothetical, if and when we did this, that, the other thing. But is that true? And if so, would love to hear some thinking around that, because I think that's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, the architectural, I'll stay in Nerdland for a little while. The architectural evolution is moving from a star schema to a graph database so that you can see the strength of the relationships between the nodes, right? And what most people understand about graph databases is that, the more sophisticated those connections are, the more you need to model to understand which of those connections are more valuable than others. And models at scale can help you prioritize that. Humans would struggle with that because there's so many different connections. You really can't discover that, Alec really loves Chipotle more than Taco Bell.
It's true.
You just would see that and then maybe he's better for one promotion than another promotion. And maybe he's got some kids that are in youth sports and he's in travel ball. So only hit him in the fall when he's really starting to ramp up. Or, all those connections are really what we're looking at. And when we say that this data set has, more than 70 million US consumers in it, we're looking at transactions through debit cards, credit cards, other partner data, and what we're really trying to do is score the strength of those connections. And everybody who's super nerdy knows that the vector databases are where this stuff is going to start to happen. We're playing with all of that stuff. And the more we do that, the more defensible our moat is, because most of our clients are really dealing with, we have their email address, we have their home address, we know they bought a ticket, they're a season ticket holder. That's like the limit of their visibility into your behavior.
Gosh, you had me at knowledge graph, and I know you can go into ontology as well. And that solves it right there for me, hook, line, and sinker. So a couple more questions before we hit time. What's the origin story around the company for you? Like, how did this come to be? And that would be the first and second to last question.
Yeah, it was really a trilogy of forces. One is Isaiah Kazavinsky, former NFL player, wanted to invest in technology. He was, had the VC goggles on and really wanted to invest. I came from a market research and data background. I knew I could see trends and patterns in the industry. And then Angela came from this global, international sports perspective, and she could just really round out what's happening in other countries, how the IOC and other sort of federations deal with sport. That was just such a powerful concept. And over the years, as we pushed on the industry to innovate, what we found was that this fan problem was the single issue, right? That everything else we wanted to talk about, stadium tech, immersive media, 3D, VR, all that stuff, it was interesting to the industry, but they needed the fan issue answered. And so we just continued to track on that. And now we're in a position to really focus on how do we help people understand who the fan is and who their future fan is. And that's something we call the fluid fan. So it's in direct opposition to the diehard fan. Fluid fans are open to change. They're empowered to choose, and they're continuously evolving because new technology is always coming. That's at the core of what we're modeling with this fluid fan graph and the ontology you talked about, that's really where we're going to focus on and really leverage AI in the future.
All right. I love that. Last question. If you had to predict in, let's say, by the end of the year, what is one of the coolest, if not the coolest examples of an innovation effort by one of the big leagues, a team level, what have you, that's going to be enabled by your technology, your collective data, and where you think things are going? Because I'm going to hold you to this, by the way, in a couple of months, and or I'll check in on it. But by the end of the year, what's one of the gnarliest things that you think is going to happen that's going to be enabled in part by you and your team and your technology?
Well, my investors are really close with Major League Baseball. And they have an initiative called Finding 42, which is to try to help diversify youth baseball in this country. Jackie Robinson's number, we're really trying to figure out how do you bring more kids, how do you make it more inclusive at the younger ages of baseball. I think our technology is really going to help them open their eyes to where the lack of access is in communities across this country and where the price point is for accessing baseball. And I think we're going to be in a really good position to partner with the MLB to help them really drive diversity and bring a new crop of players into the game.
I love it. I love it. All right, Josh, this is the wrap. Anything else you want to share with the audience, where to find you, all those types of good things before we hop?
sportsilab.com. More than happy to have anybody, follow me and hit me up on LinkedIn. Always happy to nerd out with folks, and I really appreciate you having me.
Thanks, Josh. Likewise. We'll talk to you again soon, all right?
Sounds good.
See ya.